Well, Barry, we have talked about managing resources from people to money to time. And we can all especially see money and other resources, but information?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most undervalued resource of an organization.
Really?
And it's because information is what you use to make decisions and to hold events or run your ministries, all based on information. And the Bible says in Proverbs 10:14 that a wise man stores up knowledge. And what this really means is that um, you need information to make decisions for your organization about events or reaching people, whatever that may be. And knowing where the information is and having it to make decisions, it takes some forethought. It takes some planning. So what we're talking about here very briefly is just having an information plan for your organization so
Okay.
that you have the information you need when you need it.
Okay.
So there's some basic principles here, just very simply. And one is two things. Number one is the information you already have. Is do you know where it is? Do you have a plan as to how you're going to store that and who has access to it so that when it's needed, you know who to go to. And that way you don't waste time.
That's a good point that should be made, and especially as it relates to Lutheran Blind Mission. Most of our blind leaders have it. I always encourage somebody else to have the same thing as well, whether it be in Braille or on a computer. It doesn't have to be a database, but even a Word, a document file.
Right. And the other thing is everybody doesn't have to keep a copy of it, but you ought to know who is the person that has it so that you
Okay.
don't like call three people to find out who has a particular document that you need.
Okay.
And computers do that very efficiently because you can go on your computer and you can search and find things very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But not everything is stored in a computer. So it's just good to know where things are and who to contact if you need certain kinds of information.
Good point.
Now that's one side of it. The other side is to think ahead. What information might you need in the future that you don't have today?
Okay.
You collect like name, address, and telephone number of people, but would you want to say in the future know what their experience or skills are or what their education level is? Now, if you do, the only way you're going to find that out is to ask people, so you have to start collecting it now. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't wait
Mm-hmm.
for a year down the road and decide you want to target a mailing to reach all the blind people who have a education degree. Well, if you don't have the information, you can't do that.
Can't do it.
And sometimes that information is available out on the internet or through other sources, but if it isn't, then you have to collect it yourself. And that means you need a plan as to, are you going to collect that on every contact? How do you collect other information? And who's going to be responsible for doing that? So that's all a simple information management plan does. It says, what information are we going to collect? Where are we going to store it? Who's going to do it? And how are we going to collect it? So that when we need the information to either make a decision or plan an event, we have the information we need.
Okay. So in practical terms, it would be a very good thing for each of our centers and their roundtables or their gathering point where the leaders are gathered, the blind and sighted leaders, to coordinate a couple times a year to say, what information are we getting? Now, I would assume everyone has the name, phone number, and address of those who attend. Do they also have the volunteers and the drivers, the kitchen help? Do they have the resources out there in the community to which you refer people to? Those would be
Correct.
names, addresses, phone numbers that you would need.
Right. And the other important point that I would want to stress here too is that information ages. Okay.
Ah,
In other words, for example, Dave, do you live in the same house today you lived in a year ago?
no.
See,
Actually, we just
your
moved.
address has changed. Your phone number may have changed.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
this happens all the time, especially with emails or
Yeah.
phone numbers. People convert to cell phones. So I think it's good once a year to go through your database and make sure that it's updated. That
Updated.
you go back to your members and verify their current address so that you have the most recent information on file, so that you can contact people.
So in a practical term, then you had mentioned not only collect data, but who will hold the data. That should be somebody who's willing not just to hold it, but willing on an annual basis to go through and do that updating.
Correct. And sometimes it can be done through a mailing. Many companies just send out a mailing every year and say, here's your current address, please verify it, send it back. Maybe if you don't have that many people, you just call them and next time you talk to them, say, hey, are you still at this address? Obviously, their phone number still works, so
Yeah.
you've just reached them. But it's just that process of, and then identifying on your data card or however you store the information, the last date it was updated. So the next person that looks at that record can say, oh, okay, this
Ah.
hasn't been updated in a year. I better ask these questions again.
So put that either at the top or the bottom if you keep it on a file on the computer, updated January 1
Right.
and the
And
year.
right.
Very good. Very
That way
good.
you keep things current because information will age. And of course, when you go out to contact that person, and maybe they've moved and you don't know it. So,
I've experienced with some of the outreach centers also that when somebody stops coming or even says, don't call me anymore, data should be kept and that information should be kept on that person and not just drop them. Um, because if the next leader comes in and goes, oh, I just got this new contact, but if you have that name and it says, don't call me, you might not want to call them.
absolutely. One of the things that's a good idea too is to ask people how they prefer to be contacted.
Ah,
So some people like the phone, some people prefer U.S. mail, some people say, I just want emails.
that's right.
And
That's
so
right.
you need to know that. That's worth noting on each record so that you're really meeting the needs of each individual person.
Very good, Barry. So, in conclusion, then, with managing information, it sounds like there should be an annual review. Are we missing something? Are we leaving something out? Should we be adding something? So that at least it be discussed, and you all might say around the table, nope, we're fine, but at least it was done, and possibly you'll go, this would be helpful, and then you can start adding those pieces of information.
That's correct, Dave. I think the annual review is an excellent idea because it just forces you to think about it at least once a year, and maybe you don't need to make any changes, but things are changing all the time. So new things have happened. So if you review it every year, it gives you an opportunity to take advantage of maybe some new opportunities that didn't exist a year ago. And so that would require that you maybe get additional information that's happening out there.